So where are things at the State Department and in the White House? I'm joined from Washington by David Frum. He was a speechwriter for George W. Bush, has recently written a book about Donald Trump's White House, and Applebaum is still with me. David Frum, how will history remember Rex Tillerson's period as Secretary of State, do you think?
Very likely as Donald Trump's least bad Secretary of State. I think we are clearly heading toward a period of greater instability and greater unpredictability from the president. I'll direct attention to a story that may not have broken in Britain. It was sort of a local story here, but it's indicative of what's going on. Rex Tillerson was not the only person in the Trump administration to lose his job today. Donald Trump also lost his chief personal aide, the person who would walk around with the president and hold on to things for him. And it turns out he was escorted out of the building to a new job at the Trump campaign because he's under investigation for serious financial crimes, quote unquote. That's the kind of thing that is happening more and more at the Trump White House. People going out for reasons that in other administrations would have prevented them from even serving as visitors, never mind as staff.
And Applebaum, were you a fan of Rex Tillerson?
No, I think Rex Tillerson will be remembered as a really disastrous Secretary of State. He treated the State Department as if it were a kind of non-performing part of Exxon, and he tried to reform it on that basis. He stuck to a very tiny group of advisors. He ignored diplomats and experts. He tried to do large-scale reforms, which nobody really knew the point of. They seemed mostly to do with cutting money, which is not really how you want to push a diplomatic corps. All kinds of people left the State Department under his tenure.
There were huge numbers of exits.
Huge numbers of exits, far fewer people joining. He made diplomacy seem like an unattractive thing. Having said that, these two things are not exclusive. You can say on the one hand, he was a terrible Secretary of State, and you can also say on the other hand, the next one might not be better. So it's not clear that we have reasons to rejoice.
Okay, well, David Frum, do we think Mike Pompeo is going to be less of a restraining influence on the president, and thus the world becomes more subject to the Trumpian mood changes and policy changes?
Well, Mike Pompeo, who was a businessman and then a member of Congress, was, as director of the CIA, a much more sensitive reader of the president's personality than Rex Tillerson. He invested much more effort in keeping on Donald Trump's sunny side. So he will bend more to the presidential will than Rex Tillerson. And he seems more in line with the president's views on Iran. But we are escalating already a crisis in the Korean Peninsula. The idea that we're going to now be escalating a crisis with Iran as well, 2 nuclear crises at one time, that's at least one more than we should have, and many people might think it may be 2 more than we should have.
Yeah, and expand on your idea, David, about more instability to come now. I'm thinking in foreign policy. I mean, you've got all these crises, but just in terms of the sort of the day-to-day stuff outside of the 3 or 4 critical sort of things that are on the top of the Secretary of State's list.
Well, Donald Trump has repeatedly said, both today in person and previously in Twitter, that he has his administration not quite the way he wants it, almost the way he wants it. It's indicating that more changes are probably to come, and he also seems to be more and more impatient of any kind of restraint on him. So that augurs ill for those members of his administration who have tried to restrain him in one way or another. Chief of Staff John Kelly, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, generally admired people in Washington. People are good at their jobs, and people who have often told the president, no, you can't do this, or no, you can't do that.
And I mean, it feels like people have been coming and going so frequently. Can we really believe that for another 3 years or for another 7 years under Trump, that sort of pace of chaos can carry on?
It happens in other countries. Italy for years and years had governments that changed constantly. There are Latin American countries where people come and go all the time. We've got used to thinking of the United States as a stately model where more or less things happen slowly and administrations don't change. And as your program showed, secretaries of state stick around for 4 years. But there's really no reason why we should expect that. I mean, this is a president who wants to hear, he wants people to express his will. When they don't express his will,
every president wants them to be aligned with his view, don't they? I mean,
but this is a bit more. This is not just aligned with his view. He doesn't want to hear people contradicting him. It seems that what he didn't like about Tillerson was that Tillerson sometimes said, "Well, no, Mr. President, that's not how the way these things are. I see it differently," and he doesn't want that. Mike Pompeo, what we know about him is that what he has been very good at is briefing the president, is aligning his views with those of the president. He's done a couple of things that I think are quite worrisome. One of them is his he actually lied about a CIA report. He said that, you know, it showed that there was no Russian interference of significance in the election, whereas actually the report said the opposite. So we know that he's willing to bend the truth in those ways.
David Frum, I don't want to talk much more about Russia, but how much was Russia the issue in the sacking of Rex Tillerson, do you think?
We don't really know the answer to that question because we don't know exactly when Rex Tillerson was fired. The president was clearly on his way to this decision. He's been on his way to it for a while. The chief of staff, John Kelly, it has been said to reporters that he had indicated to Tillerson on Friday, be braced for bad news. But the actual action of firing him happened today, the day after Rex Tillerson agreed with Britain, gave support to Britain, in a way that is much more full-throated than the president has yet done. The president has not yet agreed that Theresa May was correct in what she said to the House of Commons. And what is so shocking about that is in any normal administration that the United States and Britain would have worked out their statements in advance. There would have been a private agreement before either country made a public statement on a matter so serious. Instead, Donald Trump has undercut Theresa May after she's taken a public position. That's really troubling, and I'm sure it troubled Rex Tillerson.
David Frum and Applebaum, thank you both.